Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 29th August 2020. And the articles that we are going to discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now this article on page number 1 is related to the Jammu Kashmir Reorganization Act of 2019. And we note that Article 370 was abrogated in the year 2019 in the month of August. And when this Article 370 was abrogated, the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act of 2019 was also passed. And this act has made Jammu and Kashmir a union territory now from previously when it was a state. So in this regard, the Ministry of Home Affairs has now notified the transaction of business of the Government of Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir Rules 2019. And these rules mainly deal with the functions of the Lieutenant Governor and the functions of the Council of Ministers. So now as we note that Jammu and Kashmir is now a union territory, there will be a Lieutenant Governor along with a Council of Ministers. So it will be a union territory with an assembly. So these provisions are similar to the National Capital Territory of Delhi, where it is also a union territory and it has a assembly as well as Council of Ministers. Similarly, Pondicherry is another union territory which also has an assembly, while various other union territories do not have any assembly or chief minister. So in this regard, let us first understand the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act of 2019 and what are the provisions related to this union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. After that, we'll look at the new rules that have been notified by the Ministry of Home Affairs, and in this, what are the powers of the Lieutenant Governor of the Jammu and Kashmir, and also what is the jurisdiction of Council of Ministers. So let us look at these provisions now, and they will be important for us from the General Studies paper 2 point of view under the topic Constitution and Polity. Now, as we have learned that the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act of 2019 provides that Jammu and Kashmir will now be a union territory with an assembly. So in this, the section 53(1) of this act provides that there shall be a council of ministers. And this council of ministers will consist not more than 10% of the total number of members in the legislative assembly. So this is the limit on number of ministers that can be appointed in the Jammu Kashmir's legislature. Further, this council of ministers will be headed by a chief minister, and the Council of Ministers will aid and advise the Lieutenant Governor in exercise of their power in relation to the matters with respect to which the Legislative Assembly of the Jammu and Kashmir has the power to make laws. So basically, in all those areas where the Legislative Assembly has been provided the power to make laws will be dealt by the Council of Ministers, which is headed by the Chief Minister, and they will aid and advise the Lieutenant Governor in Jammu and Kashmir. However, there are times when the Lieutenant Governor will be required to act in his discretion. That is, in this case, he will not be bound by the aid and advice that is provided by the Council of Ministers. So in this, the section 53(2) provides for the discretionary powers that are available with the Lieutenant Governor. So the Lieutenant Governor can act in his discretion in a matter which falls outside the purview of the powers that have been conferred on the Legislative Assembly. Secondly, in those cases in which he is required by or under any law to act in his discretion or to exercise any judicial functions. And finally, he has the powers to act in discretion with matters related to All India Services and Anti-Corruption Bureau. So these are the discretionary powers that have been provided to the Lieutenant Governor, and in these cases he will not be bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Now, in the static portion of Indian polity, you might have learnt about the discretionary powers of the governors of states. And in this, it has been provided that the governor has to exercise his powers and functions with the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, which is headed by the Chief Minister, except in matters in which he is required to act in his discretion, that is, without the advice of the ministers. So these discretionary powers have been provided to the governors of the state in the Article 154, 163 and 164. However, such constitutional discretions have not been provided to the President of India. So the Governor has constitutional discretion in cases related to reservation of a bill for the consideration of President. Secondly, he can use his discretion for recommendation of the imposition of the president's rule in a state. Now, besides this constitutional discretion, the governors also have the discretionary powers in appointment of chief minister when no party has a clear-cut majority in the state legislative assembly, or when the chief minister in the office dies suddenly and there is no obvious successor. So, as we have learned that the governors of the states also have certain discretionary powers. However, the lieutenant governor of the union territories, and in this case the lieutenant governor of Jammu and Kashmir, has certain other powers which are even beyond the powers of the governors of the state. Now, based on the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act of 2019, the Ministry of Home Affairs has now notified the transaction of business rules. And in this, the Lieutenant Governor's jurisdiction has been clearly identified. So, according to the transaction of business rules, the police, public order, all India services, and anti corruption, all of them will fall under the executive functions of the Lieutenant Governor. That means that the Chief Minister and the Council of Ministers of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir will have no say in the functioning of police, public order, all India services, or anti corruption. Further, according to these rules, the proposals relating to the matters which are connected with the All India Service Officers and Anti Corruption Bureau shall be submitted to the Lieutenant Governor by the Commissioner or the Secretary of the General Administration Department. And also proposals or matters which affect or are likely to affect the peace and tranquility or the interest of any minority class, the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, and the backward classes shall essentially be submitted to the Lieutenant Governor through the Chief Secretary under the intimation to the Chief Minister before issuing any orders. So this means that again, any matter or proposal related to or which are affecting the peace and tranquility and also the interests of the minority communities, SCs, STs, and backward class will have to be essentially submitted to the Lieutenant Governor. So basically, the powers that have been provided to the Lieutenant Governor in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir are more as compared to the Governor of states. Regarding the jurisdiction of Council of Ministers, the Council of Ministers, which will be led by the CM, will decide on the service matters of all non-All India service officers. That is, regarding the All India service officers, it will be the power of Lieutenant Governor. And the Council of Ministers will deal only with the service matters of non-All India service officers. Also, the Council of Ministers will decide proposal to impose new taxes, land revenue, sale grant, lease of government property, reconstituting departments, offices, and draft legislations. So basically, these are the powers of Council of Ministers. Now, what will happen in those cases where there will be difference of opinion between the Lieutenant Governor of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Council of Ministers? So let us look at that aspect. So in case of difference of opinion between the Council of Ministers and Lieutenant Governor, the decision of Lieutenant Governor will be final if that matter is not resolved within 30 days. So a timeline has been provided that if the difference of opinion exists beyond 30 days, then in that matter, the decision of the Lieutenant Governor will be final. So in case of difference of opinion between the LG and ministers of Jammu and Kashmir on any matter, the LG can first refer such matter to the Council of Ministers. Now, regarding this reference by the LG to the Council of Ministers, there is a time limit that has been provided. So in this case, the Council of Ministers will have to consider the matter in its next scheduled meeting and will have to convey its decision not later than 15 days. That is, it will have to convey its decision within 15 days from the date on which the matter has been referred to it by the Lieutenant Governor. And in case if no decision is received by the Lieutenant Governor within 15 days from the date of such reference, then the decision of the Lieutenant Governor shall be deemed to have been accepted by the Council of Ministers. Further, the Rule 47 provides the reference to the central government in case of difference of opinion. So in case of difference of opinion again between the LG and the Council of Ministers, the Lieutenant Governor can refer it to the central government for the decision of the President. And then the Lieutenant Governor will have to act according to the decision that has been made by the President. So simply the LG can refer this matter for reconsideration to the Council of Ministers, or he can refer it to the central government. So basically this means that the President of India will have final say on any matter over which difference may arise between the Lieutenant Governor and the Jammu and Kashmir's Council of Ministers. So basically, the president's power has become supreme in this matter. Further, the lieutenant governor has been empowered to pass directions in such situations where the action taken by the Council of Ministers will be suspended as long as that matter has been referred to the President of India for his reference or consideration. So basically, when a matter has been referred to the President of India for his consideration, the decision or the action that has been taken by the Council of Ministers will be suspended. So basically, the decision of the Lieutenant Governor is final if matter is not resolved within 30 days. Also, when a matter has been referred to the Council of Ministers for their consideration and the Council of Ministers does not take any decision on that within 15 days, then it will be deemed that the decision of the Lieutenant Governor is final or has been accepted by the Council of Ministers. Also, the Lieutenant Governor can refer any matter of difference of opinion between the LG and Council of Ministers to the President of India. So in that case, the decision of the President of India will be final on any matter. So basically, it empowers President of India to take decisions on the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir if the Lieutenant Governor refers that matter to the President of India. Also, the rules that have been notified by the Ministry of Home Affairs talk about communication with the central government on important matters. And in this, it provides that any matter which is likely to bring the government of a union territory into controversy with the central government or with any state government shall be as soon as brought to the notice of the Lieutenant Governor and the Chief Minister by the Secretary concerned through the Chief Secretary. So basically, there should be clear communication regarding any issue which is likely to raise controversy between the Union Territory or the Government of Union Territory and the central government, and between the Union Territory and the other state governments. So that matter has to be highlighted as soon as possible. So these are few highlights of the rules that have been notified by Ministry of Home Affairs regarding the governance of the or the transaction of business of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. With this, let's take the next news article now. Now, this article is related to the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, who has stepped down from his position of Prime Minister because of bad health. And in this background, this article analyzes the Prime Minister of the Japan who has stepped down and how it has shaped Japan's profile. So in this, it is said that Shinzo Abe promoted close ties with like-minded democracies like India and Australia. So in this background, let us look at some of the key aspects of India-Japan relations, which can be important for us from the General Studies Paper 2 point of view under the topic International Relations. And you might be knowing that in the mains of 2019, a question was also asked related to India-Japan relations. So let us look at some of the important aspects of the India-Japan relations in this background. Now we note that the contemporary world order is changing, and that has mainly been because of the economic rise of China. So in this background, India and Japan have been advocating alternative worldview through various collaborations and cooperation initiatives. Now this alternative vision of India and Japan of the present world order is reflected in what is known as the Samvad Dialogue, and this was initiated in the year 2014. Now, this Samvad Dialogue was based on the philosophy of a world order which is based on the values of freedom, humanism, democracy, tolerance, and non-violence. And all these values are enshrined in the Hinduism as well as Buddhism, which are the main religions in India and Japan respectively. And these values were once again reiterated in Indian Prime Minister's visit to Japan in the year 2018. And this was reflected in India-Japan vision for Asia and the world. Now, this alternative vision of India and Japan, which is based on the Samvad philosophy, which draws values from humanism and Buddhism, mainly talks about partnership for peace between India and Japan, partnership for prosperity, and partnership for global action. Now, under the partnership of peace, the first concept of Indo-Pacific was introduced by Japan in the year 2007. And this was reflected in the Confluence of Seas policy of Japan, which talked about free and open Indo-Pacific vision. And similarly, we note that India has been advocating partnership for peace in the eastern region through its Act East policies, where it has been focusing on countries in Southeast Asia and also eastern countries like Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and in which Japan is an important partner of India. Further, both the countries are collaborating on Indo-Pacific in the Quadrilateral Grouping, which is a security dialogue and is mainly aimed at countering the military rise of China. And along with India in this quadrilateral grouping, the Japan, United States of America, and Australia are also there. Besides this, lot of security cooperation is taking place between India and Japan, and this is reflected in the 2+2 dialogue, maritime domain awareness, and also one of the important exercises that has gained attention these days, and that is the Malabar exercise. And we note that Australia is likely to join the Malabar exercise. Further, based on this Samvad philosophy, both India and Japan are partnering with each other for the prosperity of Asian region. And in this regard, both India and Japan are synergizing with each other in what is known as Innovative Asia. Also, both these countries are involved in third-party projects in different countries. And this is mainly aimed at countering the Chinese intervention in these countries. And we note that Chinese intervention comes with a lot of debt issues for the host nation. And due to the Chinese presence in the Hambantota port's development in Sri Lanka has been facing a lot of sovereign debt issues. So basically, India and Japan are collaborating to work on the third party projects or projects in third countries so that they can counter the sovereign debt issues that these countries are facing because of the increasing presence of China. Further, India and Japan have come together to develop the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. Further, India and Japan have been working together to increase connectivity in India's northeastern region. And in this, Japan has been involved in a lot of projects in the northeastern part of India. Also, India and Japan aim at connecting the northeastern part with what is known as the East-West Economic Corridor that is being developed by Japan in the Mekong region in Myanmar. Besides both these countries partnering for peace and prosperity, both are also partnering for global actions. And in this, one of the key areas on which both these countries are partnering is the reform of the United Nations Security Council. And in this, they have formulated a G4 grouping which includes India, Germany, Brazil, and Japan. And all these countries aim at securing for themselves or are advocating for themselves a permanent seat in the reformed United Nations Security Council. Also, India and Japan have been collaborating with each other on nuclear programs, and both these stand for non-proliferation. And in this regard, Japan has been advocating India's membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. And in this, we note that Japan also has a civil nuclear deal with India, despite India not being a member of the NSG. Also, Japan recognizes India's issues with the terrorism, and it has been supporting India on various global platforms in the United Nations in various initiatives that India has started to counter the terrorism. Also, both the countries are collaborating on sustainable development goals, the climate change, and one of the important areas of collaboration is the disaster management. And in this, we note that the Sendai framework deals with the disaster management. And also, both India and Japan are partnering for a multilateral trade order. Now, some of the examples can be that, for example, India wants Japan to join the Indian initiative of International Solar Alliance. So these are the few areas of cooperation between India and Japan and which are reflected in the Samvad philosophy of India and Japan, which are based on the values of Hinduism and Buddhism. Now, the points that we have discussed here could have been very important in answering the question that was asked in the mains examination of 2019. And in this, the question read, the time has come for India and Japan to build a strong contemporary relationship, one involving global and strategic partnership that will have a greater significance for Asia and the whole world as a whole. So in this, we have looked at the Samvad philosophy where both India and involved in a global and strategic partnership for improving the peace, prosperity, and the progress of Asia and the world. And these principles are based on the universal values of freedom, humanism, democracy, tolerance, and non-violence that are shared between India and Japan and are based on the Samvad dialogue that started between India and Japan's bilateral relationship. And in this background, India and Japan have been collaborating on various fronts. For example, both are collaborating on the Indo-Pacific region. Further, both are members of the Quad grouping and the Malabar exercise. Also, each other are focusing or synergizing with each other on Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, on UNSC reforms, climate change, sustainable development goals, and also on a multilateral trade order. So in short, India and Japan's special strategic partner holds promising future for both Asia and the world, and it is very important for the peaceful prosperity and progressive rise of both Asia and the world. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 6 basically talks about increasing the number of parameters that India is presently counting. And in this background, the author says that the decennial census that India conducts is alone not enough to count the different types of issues that India is currently facing. And accordingly, India needs new ways to know its cumulative human capital and also potential. Now, although this article is not very important, however, some of the issues that have been highlighted can be used in writing answers in the General Studies paper 2 in the social issues. So let us look at the points that have been raised by the author. So the author says that we need proper data to ensure holistic and inclusive development in our society. And for this, we need data and feedback to ensure some of the following issues that India is currently facing. So basically, we need more data and feedback and proper counting of the issues so that we can ensure that the underage marriage of the girls become a history or do not happen in the future. Also, more data is required for secondary school completion of every child, and especially girls in rural areas. And we note that dropout rates in the rural areas are comparatively higher as compared to urban areas, and especially that of girls is more in different parts of India. Also, more data and proper counting is required for ensuring gender parity in school completion rates. Also, the author says that still India is witnessing a large number of stillbirths, and these stillbirths are sometimes misrecorded as early neonatal deaths. So we do not have the clarity regarding the number of stillbirths that are taking place in India. Also, we need a better counting of the disease and illnesses in India, and this will be helpful in removal of vaccine preventable or easily treatable illnesses. Also, for the optimal use of our demographic dividend, we need proper data so that the nutritional status of the young population can be improved. So accordingly, the author says that optimal use of our demographic dividend by maintaining proper height-weight proportions on our young population can be ensured only when proper data regarding these issues are. Further, quality of data is required for the elimination of infant and neonatal mortality. Further, surveys are required to ensure if the school-leaving girls and boys are taught the notion of consent and also the basics of contraception. Further, the author has highlighted that India's crimes data recording system is not built to capture subtleties, and we do not know what portion of pregnancies in India start off without the consent of women, even though these pregnancies are considered as legal because of the marriage and legally and cultural approval. So the author says that together the measurement of all these issues in India will tell us far more about where we are and where we as a nation will go in the future. And also he goes on to say that people are India's greatest possessions and will remain so for the conceivable future, provided they are in a state of well-being. So the author is hopeful that the National Health Policy 2017 and the National Education Policy 2020 will hopefully guide India towards a true demographic dividend. Also, as we note that India is planning to assign digital health IDs to everyone. So in this background, the author says that what is additionally required besides these digital health IDs is the proper data collection system, which will help in ensuring its success. So these are few general points that have been discussed by the author in this regard. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 6 is related to the issue of GST and cooperative federalism. And the issues that are discussed in this article have already been discussed in detail in the Daily News Simplified of 28th August 2020, where we have discussed various issues that relate to the goods and services tax. So do go through yesterday's DNS, where the issues related to GST and cooperative federalism have been dealt in detail. With this, we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for today.